David, Adonai Eloi Eloheich Sar, Binodeshi Abitzaini, Al Mei Menuchot Yenahaleini, Nafshi Yeshovev, Yancheni V'maglei Tzedek, Leman Shemo, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צורריי. Dishanta Vashem Roshi Kosi Revaya Ach Tov V'Chesed Yirdefuni Kol Yomei Chayai V'Shavti B'Beit Adonai Le'orech Yamim.
As Cantor Schiffman began our service reciting Psalm 23 in the Hebrew, I'll ask for you to join with me if you know the words to Psalm 23 in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We gather here today on a very difficult day, even though it was a bit expected, very difficult to say goodbye to our beloved Demyam Bykhovskiy. Today we bring much tribute and love and adoration for a beloved son, a beloved brother, a beloved husband, a beloved father, a beloved grandfather, a beloved great-grandfather, a beloved uncle, and a beloved friend. Our Bible teaches, L'kol zaman ve'et, l'kol chefetz tachat hashamayim, et laledet ve'et lamut. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping, a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing, a time for refraining, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. Our rabbis teach that the day of one's death should be more precious than the day of one's birth, and they compare our lives to a ship. When a ship leaves the harbor, usually a big ship, you can imagine there is much fanfare, bands playing, parades, banners, streamers, much celebration when that ship leaves the port. But the rabbis say when the ship leaves the port, that is not a time to celebrate. For no one knows what will happen to that ship on its journey. What storms, what obstacles, what challenges lay in its path. They don't know if that ship will make its way home safely. But the rabbis say it is when that ship returns home to the harbor safely that is the moment we should celebrate. And so often when a ship returns home after a long journey, there's no fanfare. The porters are there to unload the cargo and the boxes, but no bands, no celebration. But today we can say, Zalman has departed this world. He has returned to the harbor safely, just a few weeks shy of 90 years old. He has left this world with a good name, in peace. He has returned home. Zalman has left behind in mourning his life partner, his best friend, his loving wife of more than 60 years, Luba, his children and children-in-law who were like his own, Gennady and Sophia, Lucia and Vlad, the apples of his eye, his grandchildren, Rita and Bobby, Isaac, Marina and Dan, and Alex, and the diamonds in his crown, his great-grandchildren, Kanai Nahara, Benjamin and Evan, and his brother Leba. Zalman now joins his parents, Yassel and Nachama, his sister Sarah and brother Michal, in their eternal home in heaven. At this point, there are special family tributes. We're going to call all the grandchildren forward, and Isaac and Alex will speak on behalf of the family.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is a very difficult day for the family. I know if my grandfather was here, he'd probably tell us to suck it up. He was a very prideful man. He was always a stubborn man, and a simple man at that. He had a suit for 30 years. I think he wore the same suit. He wore sneakers to my sister's wedding. He worked his entire life. He into his 70s and 80s. You know, he was on the roof of houses helping my father and working with my uncle. And he took pride in that. And he always respected people that really worked hard their entire lives and weren't afraid to get dirty. I was with him, and I've been with him over the last 2-3 years, and it's not been an easy 2-3 years, and I know he probably would say the same. He struggled, he fought, and he fought to be around and to be with us all. About a month ago, when we were together, and I had an opportunity to sit with him, and he was not feeling well. We were sitting outside, and it was, definitely a very difficult time for him, both physically and mentally. And, we were just sitting, and he had been forgetting some things. And at that moment, he was very clear and had remembered and said, and I'll say this in Russian, он сказал, «Не волнуйся, Леша, все будет нормально», which means, don't worry, everything will be fine. So he held the family together, and he'll never be forgotten.
And he was always the epitome of strength and dedication in our family, and he was always able to set this example for us and never always lived up to the examples that he set. I would remember coming home from school, getting off the school bus, and in his mid-80s he would be on the roof of our house with a leaf blower, just making sure that the gutters don't get caught. Or even maybe a year or two after he started his fight that he had with Parkinson's, my dad put a pull-up bar in my room, and my grandpa was really disappointed in me that I couldn't do more than 3 pull-ups, so he did 10. And that's always the type of example that he set, and he was incredibly dedicated and incredibly selfless. He would, I remember he would walk with me to the pool in the summers and would swim laps. He would always help out my parents, when they were working, when they were busy. My grandpa would always be at our house to watch after us. It's something that I will never forget, and it's an example that he set that I think all of us will strive to reach, and it will be difficult to do that.
Just as a final note, and my uncle wanted me to convey this for everyone. We're going to be celebrating his life after the burial at Europa. So those of you who are available and can come, we definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex and Isaac and Rita and Marina. You truly captured him. I know that you gave him the most joy in his life. And the rabbis say, Devarim sheyotzim melev nechnasim belev, that words that come from the heart enter our hearts, and you truly brought your grandfather into each and every one of our hearts. Strong and loyal, Zalman was a family man first. Family was his life. He valued also work over everything else, as you already heard. It was work, family, work, you told me. He loved people who worked. And if you had the day off and you saw him, he'd say, too many people don't work. You should go back to work. And if you visited him at the nursing home, the first thing he asked you was, why aren't you at work? He had a great sense of humor. He loved to make people laugh with his one-liners. He lived for family. He cherished his friendships. He knew everyone, and he'd often remind you how hard it is to find a good friend. His granddaughter Rita said it this way: he was my role model, my best friend, my voice of reason. Zalman grew up in Rechitsa in Belarus today at age 13. At age 13, life wasn't easy. The Germans came in and they murdered his grandparents. His family was evacuated to Stalingrad. His father drafted into the Russian army, where he was soon killed. And soon young Zalman entered the Russian army in his teens, serving there for 10 years. Zalman certainly didn't have it easy, but he was never afraid of anyone. He was tough. He'd fight anyone who called him a bad word for being a Jew. He was a proud Jew all of his life. He never hid it. He'd always tell the family old war stories, especially about the difficult battle at Stalingrad that he was in. Returning after his army service, he met and fell in love with Luba. They lived only a few blocks from each other in Rechitsa. But he was 10 years her elder. She liked that he was a bit of a bad boy, that he was never afraid of a fight, that he was rough and tumble. And they built a life and family in Rechitsa. Dad played soccer for the city team for many, many years. He worked with his hands in a furniture store. He was a carpenter and he ran the shop. He worked at that same business from the end of his army service until the family was able to flee the Soviet Union with the help of Jewish Federation. He loved work, hard work, and loyalty. He never switched jobs. He didn't like people that moved around and switched jobs. And as soon as the family landed in the States, moving together as one clan, 11 family members together moving to Cleveland where they knew no one, Zalman went to shul the next day. He met Rabbi Kazin, and by one day later, he already had a job. Everyone else in the family took them months to find employment. But for him, who taught each and every one of you the importance and value of work, with his strong work ethic, he was working in the kosher slaughterhouse with chickens, and after that, he never ate chicken again. With his beloved Luba together, they built this family, first with Dusia, and then years later having their second child, Gennady, raising them in Rechitsa. Together, Diad and Baba were loud, your typical Jewish family. He'd make the money, and he'd give it all to her. He never knew how much things cost, and she did all the shopping. Luba's parents, Bracha and Yitzchak, lived with them. Imagine your in-laws living with you, and they only spoke Yiddish, but Zalman liked it. It would serve them well knowing Yiddish, because when they came to Cleveland, Leonard Gold took care of the family, and he spoke Yiddish too. He'd always say to them in Yiddish, don't worry, one more week, it will all get better. Zalman had hands like gold. He could fix and make, always tinkering, very handy. He taught his kids how to make furniture, taught them how to tinker, to never call the repairman for a job you can do better yourself. Gennady shared with me that most husbands have a honey-do list, but he has an entire file, and he takes great pride in the projects that was inspired and taught by your father for you to do. Zalman loved his garden. He grew everything, all types of vegetables and fruits. He built a summer house on the riverbank, so you drive out there on Fridays, back on Sundays, and there too, he tended an immaculate garden. An amazing father who taught the value of work and education. He'd always... our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May he merit the reward for living a life filled with righteousness, kindness, and love. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May he rest in peace. And we all say, Amen. Please be seated. Following this service, interment will take place at Mount Olive Cemetery. In addition to the celebration of life and gratitude that's taking place at Europa following the burial, the family will be receiving friends on Sunday at Gennady and Sophia's home, 592 Rutland Highland Heights, from 12 to 4.